as we start to implement our security framework, one of the elements that can help us achieve a large number of our security objectives, our guideposts, is the use of segmented network. And a segmented network, very briefly, is two or more networks that are divided by a device that might prevent free communication, and we say might prevent here, depending on how the device is configured, might prevent free communication between systems on opposite sides of the segment or segments. And so what we're typically dealing with here is just the implementation of a firewall. And what I've got here in the Paint program is just a diagram of a couple implementations through the use of firewalls where we implement this segmentation of network. And I've got two examples here that I've started to identify. But here is our internal network in this example here. Here's the external network, which is the internet. So this is the private network. This is the public network. And the device that has the ability to restrict communication between this private and the public network, in other words, a network that we have control over and one we don't, is a firewall device that can examine the traffic as it passes out as well as is coming into the private network. Another way to think about this, not only firewalls, I just mentioned that because it's the most common, but really, again, it's any device, and these can be thought of as border gateways. A border gateway can be a proxy server, can be a virtual private network implementation, it can be a modem, anything again that separate an internal network from an external network. So in the context of security, again, that's what we're thinking about. We're not necessarily thinking of subnets. If we go back to our Paint program here, or at least my Paint program, we might have, this might represent a subnet or several subnets on the internal network. But when we're talking about segmentation in the security context here, we're talking about restricting traffic from the private to the public and vice versa. Now, two very common implementations which we deal with quite frequently throughout this entire course is the use of a perimeter network and or a demilitarized zone. And sometimes these terms are used almost interchangeably. And you can implement a perimeter network or DMZ, demilitarized zone, in one of several ways. You can either implement them using one device or with a combination of multiple devices. Over here on the left side is what is typically referred to as a demilitarized zone. These all are computers that I have control over as the network administrator of these networks. This again is my external network, the internet. And what I've done here is I've implemented a logical network that is available to public resources through the configuration of the firewall. So on the firewall configuration, I've identified these computers, this one and this one, that need to be accessed, and the firewall will pass traffic through from requesting clients to these two computers only. To other networks in my private network or other subnets in the private network, the firewall will block incoming traffic. So again, that's one way to implement a demilitarized zone. Another common way, and actually offers you another level of security, is to implement a perimeter network. And in this example here, what I've got is I've got a firewall that stands between these computers that I control and the internet. And then the computers that I want publicly available, this computer and this computer, I set off on its own logical network. Again, typically the firewall is open or is implemented on a routing device. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but typically it is. And that would make this perimeter network a separate logical network. So this becomes my perimeter network. It includes the router interfaces and any devices that I want to make publicly available. So this examines traffic and allows traffic through that might be destined for these computers, and then nothing gets through this firewall from the public. So again, because we have really two filtering devices here, we have an additional layer of security that's available through the use of a perimeter network. And again, we'll see examples of this or see implementations and where it would best fit into certain security considerations as we move throughout this course.